Anthony Diehl, welcome to the channel, man.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I am so excited, man. I don't know exactly when it was when I first came across you on social media. I know we kind of swim in similar circles. Obviously, we're doing some of the same type of things with online coaching, but man, I have really enjoyed your social media. So as I was researching, I was like, dang, this guy has done everything. I'm thinking like professional strongman. You won that competition, a strongman competition in 2020. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That was kind of the peak before my body decided to rebel.
Yes. Maybe we could talk about body rebellion here in a little bit. And, into bodybuilding and you're coaching bodybuilders. I know you stress this too. You doing just regular, just health and fitness coaching, but also there's some niches. You have 20 coaches on your team right now I was just looking through the list of all of them, whether it's degrees, certifications. You
Yeah,
guys are a powerhouse. So this online coaching is called Modus, and so I
that's
look
right.
forward to hearing kind of more about that. But man, when I was seeing the other day, you're getting pretty leaning up,
That's right.
and I was like, dude, this guy is jacked. If somebody came across your social media, they probably like, Anthony, he's just this genetic freak. He's massive, and he's probably always been this way. But I was reading just a little on your website that was not the case when you were a teenager. So maybe tell us a little bit about your journey in fitness and how you got to where you are now.
So I always played sports growing up. My mom was a high school basketball coach, female basketball coach. So I was always athletic, but I live in Lancaster County and in Pennsylvania. This is Amish country. We eat good home cooking, and I did not
Yes.
grow up in a household that prioritized good nutrition in any way, shape, or form. I had the grandmothers on both sides of the family who are feed me because I'm a growing boy and I like to eat. And so, my freshman year of college, I was very overweight, and I still to this day cannot tell you why the switch went off in my head. I just remember exactly where I was in dorm rooms with a bunch of buddies who were cutting weight, and they were checking their weight on the scale for a wrestling tournament. And I knew my pants were getting a little tight, and I'm like, where am I at? And I hadn't weighed myself in forever, and I stepped on that scale, and I was 260 pounds, but 260 pounds of not good weight at all. Realistically, yeah, it was atrocious. And something snapped in my head, and I said, this needs to change now. So I went to the gym the next morning, knowing nothing. I just walked into the basketball court, and I said, okay, I'm going to run as many laps around this gym as I possibly can do. And I made it 6 whole laps before I'm wheezing. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to add a lap every day. That's the goal. I'm going to come back in here, and tomorrow I have to do 7 and then 8 and then 9. And I went from being obese and not active enough to running every single day. And then I knew nothing about fitness or nutrition, but I think intuitively everybody knows that meat and vegetables are good for you. And so I made absolutely no plan other than all I'm going to eat is meat and veggies. And
Mm.
and that's all I did. I didn't track calories, I didn't track macros. I just ate meat and vegetables, and I ran every day. And in 9 months I dropped 90 pounds. Now, I would never advise the strategy I employed now to any of my clients. It worked, which does show the lesson of hard work delivers the results. You can have somebody on a terrible plan. If they're applying a lot of effort, they're going to get results. But what happened was I went from being a sedentary kid to running every single day with no real recovery or rest. I ended up injuring my hip. And I remember I could hardly walk without pain. And I was scared I was going to gain all the weight back. And so a buddy of mine said, hey, come to the gym with me. Okay. So I went to the gym. I've never lifted really before. I mean, I watched 80s movies growing up. So, Stallone, Schwarzenegger, all these guys, John Claude Van
Yes.
Damme. I have an idea. So I started lifting, and I realized, like, man, that inner chunky kid, I got strong fast, and I was lifting like a complete imbecile, right? Like upper body 4 days a week, the occasional leg press, just girls for the girls and bench, right?
Mm.
And but I started getting really strong. In under a year, I was repping 300 pounds on bench press. And so I just realized, like, oh, I'm built to be strong. I really enjoy this. And so that's when I kind of fell in love with weightlifting. And I did that for many years out of college, early on into our marriage. Um, and then I discovered online Elite FTS, started training more intelligently like a powerlifter in a gym. I didn't compete, but I was getting strong, worked my way up to, I don't know, maybe a 500-pound back squat, 500-pound deadlift. I'm benching close to 400 pounds. And a buddy of mine said, hey, do you want to come outside with us and do farmers carries? And I grew up watching Strongman on ESPN. So I'm like, oh, let's go try this out. And this kid was probably 60 to 80 pounds lighter than me. And he picks up 200 pounds per hand and runs for 60 feet. And I'm like, that's pretty impressive. But if he can do it, I'm going to kill him. And I stand up with this and I'm like a drunk baby deer. I could hardly walk. And I was like, well, I'm very competitive. I was like, I need to get better at that thing. And he's like, well, we train at my buddy's house every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. So Saturdays I started going. I got introduced to log presses and stones and all the strongman
Yes.
stuff. Started doing that for about 8 weeks. Absolutely loving it. And the guy who's kind of coaching us just comes out in the garage one day and goes, all right, fellas, there's a competition in 4 weeks and I signed you all up. So dove into my first competition, set a deadlift PR on an axle, and I was hooked. Absolutely hooked. So I found Strongman at 27, poured myself into that as a hobby on the side. And I turned pro when I was 32. I won America's Strongest Man when I was 33. And in there, somewhere in between there, all of that's happening, I'm growing my career in the corporate world. And I've always loved working with people. I was in operations at Starbucks and at Amazon. And so as people saw me naturally getting stronger, hey, can you help me? Sure. And for some people, initially it was free because I needed to kind of prove that I could get a result.
Yeah.
So I did. I started charging a little bit here and there. And it started growing. But what took me down the rabbit hole of nutrition is my middle son, he's 10. He was diagnosed with autism at 2. And so his health maladies kind of drove me down the rabbit hole of what can I do to help this kid. To that point, my wife was a good cook. We weren't eating terribly, but we weren't tracking anything in any meaningful way. And, there's a lot of junk in there, a lot of fast food, takeout Chinese, all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, hey, we got to drop inflammation to help this kid. He had fluid on the brain. I was like, I want to help him in his speech therapy and his, whatever else. And so his occupational therapy. So we really shifted as a family our entire nutritional approach. And that was the only variable at that point that changed. And my performance, like, it went completely vertical. I mean, I just started exploding in strength and performance by dialing my nutrition, which led me to go down that rabbit hole. And I've always been a very curious person. And so my coaching business, I've been coaching coming up now on 11 years now. And it's just, it's exploded from there. That's the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, man, it's fascinating. When did you so you did the strongman and like underneath that just like basic powerlifting, not a competing powerlifter, but you had that kind of foundation.
That's right.
When did you switch into like this more of the bodybuilding phase? Was this just
Yeah.
kind of like you mentioned body breakdown and submission, or like just more like, oh, hey, I actually really like this training, kind of like zeroing in on building a physique? What's your thoughts there?
Sure. So the gym that I trained at as a strongman in Lexington, Kentucky, was a bodybuilder gym. Some really good bodybuilders, some very well-known bodybuilders. Still to this day, people will know brands like Revive MD.
Yeah.
The owners of that were at my gym. And
Okay.
so everything that
Nice.
I learned about nutrition and physique development, I would go to all their seminars that they would host. Then I would just apply it to strongman. And I would go to a strongman gym in a city about 45 minutes away on the weekends to hit all the big events like log stones, axles, all of that. But I trained every day in just a bodybuilder gym. So I was surrounded by an ethos of bodybuilders, and bodybuilders are miles ahead of everybody when it comes to nutrition.
Yeah.
So I learned from them all while I was doing strongman, and so many of my friends were bodybuilders. So I was kind of immersed in that culture anyways. And then I won America's Strongest Man, had the best peak of my life. Just everything went off without a hitch. And then I competed in Russia on Team USA in a team competition. And I got back in April of 2021 and training for another strongman competition. I tore my bicep on an axle. I had to have that surgically repaired. And like a typical meathead, I pushed the recovery way too fast. I mean, I think my wife still gets mad at me when I bring this up. I have a video of me in the cast from surgery the day before hitting a 700-pound safety squat for a triple. Because I'm like, well, I don't have to use that arm. I can just hold on with one arm, right?
Don't
Like,
lose the gains.
don't
Yes.
lose games. And so, rush the recovery. 3 months after that, I'm back to like pressing 300-pound logs. And because I didn't let it recover properly, there was a lot of compensations going on. I ended up herniating a couple discs in my back and let those heal. And then it was like July later of that year, I herniated a disc in my back again. And I'm like, okay, I've always known that I wanted to compete in bodybuilding after my strongman career, but I wanted to hit certain strength goals first. And I thought, all right, at this point, I've won America's Strongest Man. I could try to keep healing and going further, but really at that point, that was kind of the peak of what I could do. And I was like, I've proven myself in strongman. I don't need to prove anything else, but I also know myself. And if I don't commit to something, then I'm going to be in the gym hurting myself on a max stone load in 2 weeks. So I called the guy who was my coach, great dude, still in Lexington, coaching tons of people. And I'm like, hey man, 1 year from now, I'm going to compete in PA muscle and you're going to coach me and we need to start this next week. Cause if I don't commit to something else, like, and so he completely, with strongman, everything's front loaded, right? It's your presses are out here, your stone loads are out here, farmer's carries are out here. So I had a huge back and ridiculously strong quads, like almost a 600-pound front squat, but I had like no glutes, which was leading to the low back injury. Well, bodybuilding was a great way. I had a lot of size, but it was kind of size in the wrong spots. So really it took a couple years. I'm only just now, this many years later, actually looking like a bodybuilder because I had way too wide of a waist, no glutes or hamstrings really, big quads, big back. I was just size in the wrong spots for bodybuilding. But focusing on that, I have no pain whatsoever.
Oh
Like,
man, that's great.
brought
Yeah.
the hamstrings up, brought the glutes up, balanced everything out. So proportionally look better, feel good. And I just realized while doing that, man, I feel great. My sessions are the longest session I have is like a leg day, which maybe is an hour and a half. And, with strongman, there's all this setup and all the equipment. I mean, a strongman training session can be 3 hours long. And I'm like, and then when you leave, I realized I was giving the worst of myself to my family because your central nervous system's destroyed. And so you get home and you just want to sit on the couch and do nothing and recover. And my kids are starting to grow up. Like with bodybuilding, I feel some muscular soreness, but I feel great when I leave the gym. I'm there for literally half the time. Like this is just the moving forward. And
Yeah.
so I fell in love with bodybuilding. And at the time, my reputation had started to grow because I think I really got blessed in that I started putting an emphasis on health for performance in the strength world before it was cool. So, this is like 2010, 2011. I'm in the strongman world talking to people. I'm preaching, health and nutrition for performance. And all you had at that time, when you think of powerlifters, you think of these obese dudes who can lift a house, but you don't really think health. You just think brute strength. Then you have guys on the scene like Dan Green coming on who are shredded
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
breaking records. And I'm like, okay, so you don't have to be obese to be strong. And so I really started preaching that message. And I was one of the very few voices in that world. And certainly winning competitions like America's Strongest Man gave me some popularity and notoriety in that place and helped lead flow. But I began to get a reputation for getting people healthy or keeping them healthy while they're abusing the crap out of their bodies, right? And then I just pivoted that into bodybuilding. My first bodybuilding client, I actually did not even want to coach her because I don't want to coach anything I've never done. And to that point, I hadn't competed yet. And she was a long-standing client of mine, a pro MMA fighter, transitioned to strongman, and she tore her labrum in her shoulder, but she was very driven and likes to compete. And she's like, okay, well, since I can't lift heavy overhead, I want to try competing in figure. And I was like, awesome, sweet. I have a long list of coaches I can recommend you. And she's like, no, I want you to do it. And I was like, well, that's not my world. She's like, I know, but like, I trust you. We've worked together. We have a great relationship. I mean, I had to it was like 3 weeks of back and forth. And finally I was like, fine, I'll do it. Just know I'm confident in my ability to learn, but like, I've never done this. So bear with me because I got to go down this rabbit hole and learn. And you're my guinea pig. And her very first show ever, she got second place.
Wow.
Absolutely looked fantastic. And I just fell in love with, and on top of that, she had lupus. So autoimmune diseases on top of that are pretty complex. And I fell in love with, and here's how I define bodybuilding: it is the art and science of using weights and food like a hammer and chisel to craft a physique. And I
Yeah.
fell in love with the process of doing that for people and looking at the different criteria and looking at their strengths and weaknesses. And then, you know, trying to keep them healthy in the process, started diving deep into blood work, took a bunch of classes, built relationships and friends, with doctors and people who were experts in the field, did a lot of mentorships and one-on-ones. I've spent a ridiculous amount of money doing mentorships to go deep and learn. And I've spent most of my time in female health simply because female health is so much more complex than male health. If you can coach females, men are not that hard. There's obviously differences, but that's how I got into the bodybuilding space. Of course, I started competing myself, and then taking on more and more competitors, and and here we are, all these
That's
years later.
awesome. Well, I think the cool thing is it gives you like a really something to chase after, you know. And now that you've like competed yourself too, like you'll feel like, hey, I know, yeah, I've done this several times myself. I've taken other people through, and I've noticed you've had you have a ton of like bikini competitors, physique competitors, which is awesome. Like, um, and I think that's great. Now, did you start with your first client? Were you in like the more the natural space or more of like the
She was natural. I have plenty of enhanced lifters as well. And I have actually a lot of both. And I have a lot of people who they'll come to me like this is their first time, and I'll tell them, hey, you should not do anything. Um, you should see if you even like this process, and let's keep you healthy first. This is hard enough on its own. In my opinion, bodybuilding is the most mentally tough thing I've ever done in my life. I've done a lot of hard things, and I'm training for a marathon right now, and I still have every intention of competing in bodybuilding again. I'm not giving that up in any way, um, but I'm training for a marathon, and not to knock my friends who do marathons because it's hard, especially when you run at those crazy high paces and the work it takes to build up that ability, that cardiovascular capability is insanity. But if I put a gun to your head and said you must go run 26.2 miles right now, you're going to be home around supper time. And so it's such a finite window of suffering. Like, you're going to be slow, but it's going to hurt. But you can suffer for 5 hours, right?
right? Yeah,
Bodybuilding, you need to be mentally dialed and perfect on a diet for 6 months. That is so hard. Every single time you go out to eat and your friends are, no,
yeah,
nope.
no,
It's your birthday, don't care. It's your anniversary, don't care. Don't plan a vacation, right? Or if you do, have fun eating your chicken and rice and asparagus while everybody else is, enjoying a 5-star meal. That's just what's required to do well and come in that lean.
yeah.
You've got to be locked in. So I think I enjoy the mental grind. It's the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I would imagine. I've never competed in bodybuilding. I'm turning 40 this year. And so I've
Okay.
just well, first, a little bit about me. I've always kind of oscillated. I started off in like powerlifting, really enjoyed it. I read Arnold Schwarzenegger's encyclopedia on bodybuilding, kind
Yeah.
of got from that point on into more of the bodybuilding space. Then I came across and I saw you had a picture with my buddy Mike O'Hearn.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, oh, okay, power bodybuilding. Let me give this a shot. And I trained that way for years. And
Yeah.
I saw some great improvement. Eventually, and you can push back against this a little bit, but I find that um, when you train with too many modalities at one time, you can end up kind of not that you shouldn't. And actually, like your point here, because you were talking about training for endurance. You did a post the other day about like cardio won't kill your gains. So
That's
sometimes
right.
people will kind of pin these against each other or pit these against each other rather. Um, but I found like, oh, if I want to get optimally strong, I probably need to focus on the strength part. Or if I want to get optimally developed as like a bodybuilder type of person, then I probably need to focus on that. Nothing wrong with having strength elements, but really trying to maximize both of them was hard. And
You're
so
not
I
wrong about
did
that. I
power
totally
building for
agree.
years. Go ahead. Yeah, add to that.
No, I completely agree with that. I mean, what you're seeing right now in the hybrid athlete space, a lot of these jacked people doing these crazy times, they didn't do those things concurrently at the same time, or very few do, right? Even take CrossFitters. Rich Froning didn't become that jacked and that fit by doing WODs. He didn't. He trained like a power builder for most of the year with, he'd come in, hit one of the big four, like a power lifter, hit his accessories like a bodybuilder, and finish with some kind of metabolic conditioning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sprinting, battle ropes, run, whatever, layered in there. And then as CrossFit season, starts to approach, he's going to transition more into the Metcons,
Yeah.
right? And
Yep.
WODs. But he didn't build his body that way, right? And so I'll never say, listen, if you're aiming to be Mr. Olympia, you should not do that and try to train for an ultra. That's foolishness.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to be Mr. Olympia ever. And I have no visions of grandeur that I'm going to hit some, record pay. I just want to do an ultra. So I'm turning 40 in 2 years. I'm 38. My goal for my 40th year is I'm going to compete in classic physique, and I'm going to chase that Masters Pro card. I'm going to do a sanctioned powerlifting meet and try to get something basic on the board, just maybe like a 600-pound squat, 650 deadlift, 400-pound bench. And then I'm also going to do an ultra that year. And I'm going to spread it out across the year. I just want to show people that you can be well-rounded. But if I was trying to be elite in any one of those categories, no, you cannot be Chris Bumstead, Mr. Olympia, while training for an ultra. That's just
Yes.
not going to happen. So understand your goals and what it is that you're trying to do. But for the average person who wants to be well-rounded, I'm just trying to communicate to the bodybuilders, hey, look, an ultra marathon is very different than getting out there and jogging for 20, 30 minutes. Like,
Yeah.
you're not going to kill your gains, right?
Yeah.
Or you runners, hey, if you would spend 2-3 days in the gym, your times are going to increase. If you can get those legs stronger, right? So I'm just trying to show people that you can be a well-rounded person. You don't have to be, there is a joke going on right now about hybrid athletes. Like, yeah, hybrid athlete, mediocre at everything. And, some people can take offense to that. I'm okay with that. As I age and get older, look, I'm not pressing 400-pound logs over my head anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I don't
people ask me all the time, like, dude, how much can you bench or something like that? And I'm like, I don't even know, because I'm not in that powerlifting space. I'll do so like what we're talking about for those listening in is this idea of phase potentiation. So like you're allowing one phase to kind of potentiate that next phase. So you might do a strength training phase, and you're really focused on that. It's not doing a couple modalities concurrently. Like it's like strength phase, and you might have a competition in mind too. But then, and this is the way I do my own personal training, is like I'm doing this to potentiate the next phase. So like I'm trying to get stronger, and then I'm gonna switch to more of like more focused hypertrophy. And so I take those neurologically stronger muscles, and now I'm going to try to actually get them bigger. And then after I max out on like getting them bigger, I might even throw like several hypertrophy phases, mesocycles, and then I might throw in another strength training phase. Now that I have bigger muscles, I'm going to now train them to be strong and fire fast and so forth. And it allows me to continue to break through plateaus, but it also allows me to be that well-rounded. I have seasons of really focused strength with hypertrophy on the kind of inserted in there on the outer skirts. And then there's other times where strength is taking more of a backseat. I want to keep those elements there. And I still do like a lot. I keep a lot of like the benches, squats, deadlifts still in my hypertrophy, even though I do usually kind of rotate off like a regular deadlift because they're so systemically fatiguing. It's like I'll do stiff leg deadlifts for the more hypertrophy, hitting that posterior chain. But I really like that approach. Right now, I'll do one strength mesocycle a year where I'm lessening the amount of like hypertrophy work to really focus on, can I press these numbers? What's my max on these lifts? And but then I might do 2, depending on how I feel, 2 mesocycles, but then I really focus on hypertrophy. I prefer hypertrophy. I feel like it's a better, and this is just my opinion, but I think it's a better long-term strategy because I think you did a post on this recently. Muscle is the organ of longevity. And so it's like, if I can build as much muscle mass on my frame, which is, I'm probably going to do that better by doing hypertrophy training. And that's going to support longevity. And if you're doing hypertrophy training, you're going to be strong. You're applying progressive overload. And I feel like you're getting strong at a pace that your joints and ligaments can keep up with and be healthy. And I know there's going to be some powerlifter people who are like, you could do that in powerlifting. And you probably can. But I know for me, when I was just grinding all the time with how heavy I could lift, I was feeling it. But switching to a bodybuilding approach, I felt good leaving the gym, but I also felt challenged. So I can relate with what you're saying. I don't know if you
Yeah.
want to add to that.
No, I completely agree with that. I mean, I'm in a phase right now where I'm still cutting. I want to cut another 10 pounds. And so strength is not a priority for me. I mean, I'm trying to lift
Yeah.
as heavy as I possibly can, with good form in bodybuilder style rep ranges. When I start to dip in body weight, what I notice goes first is my pressing ability. I could probably squeak out a 400-pound bench single, but it'd be ugly. And I haven't even tried, and I don't care. Right now, I'm still hitting PRs on my larger muscle groups like back and legs.
Nice.
But again, when I say PRs, I mean in the 8 to 10 rep range.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not pushing 1 rep maxes. It's not the time for that. I'll run the marathon in November, and then I will taper down my cardio big time, and I'll go into a growth phase. Right.
Yeah.
And I will focus on, after that growth phase, then I will focus on some numbers again. And so exactly what you said. I think when you're 20, you can get away with training concurrently. I mean, I got away with a lot. As you start to get older, it really, and you start to get more elite, in your lifts, in your performance, in your running, then you need to be a lot more careful and surgical with your training cycles, I think.
I want to ask you a little bit about your training in just general with your clients and stuff. I think this is interesting. So your company's Modus. Maybe you could answer this question. What's the idea behind the name?
Yeah.
I know because I've heard you describe it, but I think other people would find it interesting. And you said on your website, you said that Modus is grounded in the belief that lasting health starts at the cellular level. And I'd love for you to unpack that. People would be like, "Oh, that sounds cool. What do you mean by that?" So
Yeah, that's
describe
right.
it.
So the name Modus, you've probably heard the phrase modus operandi.
Yeah.
The word modus means a method or a way of doing something. What I want to communicate there is this is a way of life. And we at Modus have a very specific way we approach all of our clients. Now, something I'm preaching always, I preach two phrases to my coaches and clients. One is principle over method. A lot of different methods out there that can be used at different times, but there's just principles that we want to apply, and that's going to look different to every single person. Then the other thing is, if you are healthy at the cellular level, you will look and perform better. Period, full stop. I've seen that in my life. And so when somebody comes to us, if they want to be an endurance athlete, if they want to be a powerlifter, if they want to be a bodybuilder, or if they're just dad who wants to get off of blood pressure meds, we're gonna apply the same principle, which is, where are you at with your metabolic health? Because we have to get that squared away. You come to me and you want to get jacked, and we get your blood work and your triglycerides are 190. Well, we're solving that first, because we have to fix that. Our first goal is to get you healthy. And trust me, if you take the time to do the work to fix internals, it might feel like 2 steps back, but you're going to go so much further, so much faster if we do that. So our approach is a health first approach with everybody, no matter your goal. Okay. I don't care what niche you're in. Again, bodybuilder, powerlifter, strongman, lifestyle client. We're going to start with health first, and then we're going to go from there. So that's what the name means. And that's kind of the underlying principle.
Yeah. I love that. Can you give me an example of principle over method?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, people will ask me all the time, whether it's a dietary question or a training method. Hey man, what's your training style? Are you following kind of like a West Side template? Do you do?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Hey man, so what's your style? My style is, what do you need? I don't even know until I talk to you. When people message me in my inbox, tell me about your programs. We haven't had a conversation. So until I hear from you, What's your injury history? What's your age? What's your experience level? How many days a week can you train? Are you training at a gym with equipped with weights? Or are you at home with
Yes. Yeah.
barbell? Like, what's your ultimate fitness goal? I got to know all of that stuff first. And then I'm going to come up with a plan that takes into account where you are,
Yeah.
where you ought to be, where you want to be. And we're just going to close those gaps in that order. And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
there's a lot of different methods nutritionally. Should you go plant based? Should you be meat based? Should you be vegan? Should you do that? I have no idea. The only thing that I can tell you right now, um, I don't think there's ever a place for veganism, personally,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a place for plant based, right? Every dietary method, might as well just do this now. I'm going to do a piece of content later today on this exact thing. A little framework or an illustration that I give to people is whether it's fasting, 24-hour fasts or intermittent fasting or plant-based or carnivore or whatever, all of those things should be viewed as tools in a toolbox. When you have a toolbox and you have tools, you get the tool out to do a task and then you put it back. But they're
Mm.
never meant to be just always, right? They're useful for certain times and things. I don't like, personally, I'm not a fan of long-term carnivore. I mean, hey, if you can sustain it and your health and your blood work's good, good for you. I'll use it when it's appropriate. I have a client, she's a bikini competitor or wellness competitor now. And sometimes she has some autoimmune issues and she can have some psoriasis flares, some Hashimoto's issues, whatever else. And when she has a flare, we'll go on a week or two of carnivore, clears it right up, brings her back down, drops the inflammation, and we can ease those carbs back in and she can continue her growth. Because the carnivore guys aren't going to like me hearing me say this, but you are not going to grow efficiently without carbohydrates. Period.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Oh yeah.
Not if you're trying to be a bodybuilder. So it's just a tool. I'm applying a principle and I'm using a particular method for a small window of time to address a thing. Another example, is protein bad for your kidneys? Not even remotely if you are a healthy person. But what about if you do have chronic kidney disease? If you have chronic kidney disease or if you've had a kidney replacement or donated a kidney, we need to be careful. We need to monitor that EGFR and creatinine. Creatinine being elevated with anybody with a little bit of muscle is totally normal and fine, so long as your EGFR is good. This is looking at how well your kidneys filter the blood. And so if that is impaired, I'm going to take people down to the absolute basement on recommended protein and take them down to like 0.6 grams per pound of body weight, supplement with some EAAs so they have their amino acids to be able to recover. And then we're going to address the kidney issues and however long that takes. And then when that EGFR function is restored, then we can start slowly easing the protein back up. So it's just a method, but we're applying principles.
Yes.
The reality is that every single person is a unique individual. And so I'm not married to any one system or methodology or whatever. I'm going to do what is best for that person in that situation.
So they want to start with what are your methods are, and you're like, well, let's start with what your goals are, and then we can
Correct.
map out what that looks like. And I like to say, like, generally speaking, I have coached people on how to do like something like a ketogenic diet right. There's ways of
Sure.
doing it wrong, ways of doing it right. Just like utilizing carnivore. But generally speaking, I'm like, if a diet has a name, we probably are going to avoid it. We just,
Yeah.
we just, we're probably just not going to generally do that unless there is some type of inflammation response that we need to
Sure.
deal with. So limiting some forms of carbohydrates or, um,
Absolutely.
the amount of fat that you use or whatever. It's some people respond really well to like a higher fat, lower carb. Some people go insane with that. Some people kind of oscillate. They never quite do keto. You know what I mean? Like it's like I'm going to do keto, but I want to have high weekends with carbs, and it's like, well, you're really not doing keto because you're not burning ketones for energy. So you're kind of in and out of this keto flu idea, and it's like if you want to be suboptimal, you could live there. But if you want to be optimal, you got to learn a different way of training or a different way of nutrition.
Yeah.
But probably like with methods too, you're like, we have guiding principles, like when it relates to form training, you know.
Sure.
But
Or I would say nutrition, something like whole food,
yeah,
right?
yeah, there you go. That's good. Yeah,
We're going to eat mainly whole foods. That's going to look different from person to person, but there's a principle. We eat 80 to 90% whole food.
yes, yeah. Now this segues to a little bit of a different question. So we've got to know you. what you do. I'm curious, what is your biggest concern with, like, in the fitness industry right now? Just something that just irks
Hmm.
you. Let's get into controversy, Anthony.
Well, I'm unashamedly a conservative person. I think one thing that does irk me is not everything, but a little bit about the Maha movement. Um, there's a couple things. One, all the interventions, or not all, I shouldn't say use the word all. Many of the interventions and things that they're suggesting are completely out of reach of people who are in lower middle class and low income, right? They're pushing, hey, go out and get a continuous glucose monitor, wear the Aura Ring, wear the Whoop strap. I love all those things. I'm a nerd. I have data for days. I've got my Apple Watch, this strap. I've got the AI glasses with the front end display so I can see my heart rate and pace when I'm running. Like, I love all that stuff. But I don't think a lot of these things are real, practical, workable solutions. And also, the simple fact is the government can ban or do whatever they want. RFK Jr. can tell people to remove food dyes. You still have the choice whether you buy it or not. So waiting for daddy government to save you, why were you buying that in the first place if you thought it was bad? Like, I don't like this idea of the government's going to come and rescue us. Take personal responsibility. If you didn't take it before, you're not going to take it when they remove stuff. You're still going to eat overly processed foods. They're not getting rid of that, right? You're still not going to hit enough protein. The government can't mandate that you go out and get 10,000 steps a day. And so that's kind of a frustrating piece a little bit is I don't know how practical some of these solutions are at actually influencing public health. Instead, harp over seed oils all you want. Like, when I have somebody who's morbidly obese, I'm not talking to them about seed oils, right? Or what if you have the low income person who can't afford organic food, and we can get even into a debate if we wanted to about whether or not that is absolutely necessary. But let's just grant that organic food is better. We'll just say that for sake of conversation. If they can't afford it, maybe a better solution is to walk into, and I want to make a video doing this, go find the sketchiest little Save Mart in the most ghetto area of downtown Philly. Walk in there and show how you can eat healthy. Hey, here's a bag of rice. Here's a bag of potatoes. Can't afford fresh produce. Here's some frozen, right? You can get this instead of the TV dinners. Don't buy the Coke that's loaded with sugar. Go over here and do this. Like, that's the kind of stuff that's actually going to make meaningful change in people,
Mm-hmm.
than indexing on all of these other things that really, if it actually mattered to the people who can do something about it, you would have done it already.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's just, it's a lack of personal responsibility, which ironically is what, and again, I'm a conservative, but which ironically is what the right always preaches, is personal responsibility. And I'm like, I don't know, man. When you look at obesity rates and metabolic health, it's the worst in most of the red states in the Bible Belt. Like, maybe some pastors ought to start not taking thirds at the potluck and start preaching on it, right? Like,
Ooh,
so that
yes.
just gets me like
Yeah.
torqued.
Yeah. I wonder if you would agree with this. Like most of, when it comes to like metabolic health, if you can reduce body fat and gain muscle mass, all of your health markers are going to change.
All of them.
And it's been proven like over and over again that you can do mostly processed foods and lose weight, get enough protein to gain muscle mass, and
Sure.
actually see. There was this whole study, like the Twinkie diet thing. Have you
Yeah.
heard of it? It's not really a
Oh,
Twinkie. Obviously, there's some metabolic issues that if you just did that, that you would have. Obviously, not getting enough protein. But the guy lost over 30 pounds just by being in a caloric deficit, and all of his health markers changed, and he wasn't on, like, I mean, there's plenty of seed oils and this type of stuff, and there's plenty of
correct.
things. And the point is not like, hey, go eat all these things. You can do whatever you want. The more the point was like, hey, health is driven primarily by me actually losing the fat and gaining the muscle. It can be improved upon by the types of food that I eat. So now I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I've changed myself metabolically by losing fat, gaining muscle. I can improve this by giving myself better fuel. So,
That's
and
right.
personally, in my coaching, I move people towards like whole foods, like,
Absolutely.
right away. But like, I mean, even protein powders, it's that's processed. That's
Sure.
processed food.
Sure.
So it's just kind of like, but this is a different kind of processed food. I actually wouldn't put this in a negative category. So there are some processed
Sure.
foods, and I think there's like 4 categories of processed foods in the scientific literature, and it's important to kind of know which one am I talking about, what categories am I placing this in. But I, for me, for my clients, it takes off a lot of psychological load to say, hey, let's first just try to work on staying in your budget, getting your protein. Let's hit those two things.
Right.
And then as the weeks go on, we're going to actually improve on the quality of your protein, the quality of your fats, your carbs. We're going to eliminate things that may cause inflammation. And this is actually why, and I love that you do this. This is why we have incorporated, like at the beginning, we do a blood test in
Sure.
our training to make sure, like, hey, I can give a whole lot more specificity to
Yep.
what you need in your nutrition. Then I mean, I can give you kind of basic proteins, carbs, and fats, but we can hone this to even see where you're deficient in your micronutrients and so forth. Speak to that,
Right.
because I know that you do
Well,
that as well.
and you just went right back to, and I'll get to that in a second, but what you're doing is going right back to meet the client where they're at. If I have somebody who comes to me who's already really dialed and they're tracking, they're fit, and they just want to go to the next level, yeah, I'll go down the rabbit hole with them on how we can do all the biohacks, right? Like, most people don't need biohacks. But we can index really deeply on food quality. But when somebody comes to me who's morbidly obese and has more than 200 pounds to lose, we're not starting there. So every client is going to get kind of a different look depending on where they're at the time. And yeah,
Yeah.
so I've heard people argue that blood work at the beginning is kind of overkill and you don't need it. Well, here's the deal. If you told everybody, hey, only eat whole food, get 10,000 steps a day, sleep well, and do something moderately difficult 3 times a week, some form of resistance training, and everyone does that for a year, they're going to be markedly better. There's no doubt about that. And a lot of health issues would resolve or get better. But what I like to do is, the reason I like to do blood work is, like you said, I can get a lot more precise very quickly, because you can look skinny on the outside and have horrible triglycerides, elevated liver function, and impaired kidney function. And we're not going to know that by looking at you. And when people come to me, if they're at a loss, like I've been trying everything and I can't lose weight, I tell people all the time, I'm not going to get you your dream body in 12 weeks. I can cut your triglycerides in half. That I can do. And then when you see that, now you're like, oh, wow, I made these improvements. I might not have the physique of my dreams yet, but I know that I'm walking on the right path, because it goes back to the message I'm preaching. Fix the inside first. If you're healthy at the cellular level, you'll look and perform better. Fix the inside and continue doing those right behaviors, and the outside will follow up, right? That's a downstream impact, but we got to fix the inside first. So that's why we get blood work, is to be a lot more intentional out of the gate, lead with health. Then when they're healthy, it's great. We get a clean blood work panel back and we're like, awesome, I can put you in a deficit, or if you want to grow, we can grow, like, evaluate where they're at in their goals, and then we can rock from there.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. On the training side of things, so we hit on like some like nutritional side, any training trends that just irk you? I'll tell you one.
Novelty.
I'll tell you one real quick. I'm curious if you have seen this. There's this huge trend right now. It's kind of coming off of the science guys. Like, at least they try to tout themselves as the science guys. That, like, all you need, and it's kind of dipping back into the Mike Menser training style a little bit, but it's not like one set to failure. It's more of like, um, all you need is low volume and really heavy weights. So you're shooting for like 4 to 5 reps. If you're doing 10 to 12 reps, you're just wasting energy. It's only the last couple of reps that are really good. I don't know if you've seen that, but that's
Oh, yeah,
something
I've seen it.
that has been
This
like,
always comes back in. Like, you're going to get the guys who train like Arnold and Franco, and then you're going to get the guys who train like Dorian Yates and, Mike Metzer, and you're going to have those battle. And the reality is, they both work. They both work, but I've seen very few people actually be able to take their body to the point of true failure to get a ton of value out of a Metzer style training. I
yeah,
do have a
yeah,
few athletes who actually do. I've done it myself. I mean, my approach right now when I walk into the gym, now, just to be clear, I'm in a cut, so I'm not trying to grow. Growing muscle is way harder than maintaining muscle. And so I go in, I've been training now for a long time, and I have really good setup, form, and execution. 1 or 2 feeder warm-up sets, and then I will do like 2 all-out brutal sets and move on to the next exercise.
yeah, yeah. That's
But
great.
I don't trust a 20-year-old who's new to training, who has never put their body through the absolute ringer. I mean, I've quite literally taken my body to the point of breaking and needing surgery So I know where the line is,
Yep.
right? And so few people, it's like most people, if I put them on a hack squat and I say, I want you to go to absolute failure, um, when they stop, there's 3, 4, 5 more reps in there. And again, if
Mm-hmm.
you're a lifestyle client, I'm going to push you. I'm going to push you to do more, go a little harder, because yeah, you know what? Those last few reps that are just so hard to squeeze out, that is where most of the juice is. That's where we want. That's where the growth comes from. So if you're one of my bodybuilders or an athlete, I'm pushing you hard. And I don't do training to failure all the time, and if I do, it's maybe 1 or 2 sets in a session on specific movements, and I'll never do it on something like a squat or a deadlift. Always on pendulum squat, leg press, maybe even a leg extension, something that's not as systemically fatiguing. um, I guess what I get irritated isn't by, I just get irritated by dogma, because again, you have to assess that person and where they're at and what kind of training mentality they have, right?
Yeah.
And I have a few guys who I have on like very, very high effort, very, very high effort and low volume, and they respond really, really well. But
Yeah.
then when I get a young person who's never truly pushed, I got to throw volume at them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I like that. And I like the balance of that too, because I don't know if you went through these stages, but I forget the training program, but I came across this program. It was like everything in 4 to 6 range. Everything was in 4 to 6, like everything that
Sure.
you did, even curls, like you're doing bicep curls, is like heavy as possible, 4 to 6 range. And I was just like, that's the way to grow, bro. Then I came across, I think, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I was like, well, the dude's jacked. He's got to know what he's talking about to some level. So I started doing Arnold and actually grew better with that, having a little bit more variety. And Arnold would do a lot of pyramid type stuff too, where you would actually hit like in bench 10, 8, 6, 4. So you would hit the heavier range, but you would also do something that was just a higher rep range. And I actually grew a lot from those pyramids. Um, and I know there's some complications with progressive overload that people have with a pyramid, but I really grew a lot from that time period.
I
And
think
also
you grow from
just
all
do it.
of it.
I say again.
I think you grow from all of it because you're changing the stimulus. And so if you're doing all sets of 12 to 15 reps, and then you do a phase where you drop down to 4 to 6 and you're challenging yourself in a different rep range, and then you go over here to this style, the change in stimulus is what's driving the adaptation, so long as the effort
Yeah,
is
mechanical tension. Like you got that
yeah,
mechanical tension
if
there
the
with you.
if the effort is there. So I don't really get dogmatic on your method. How hard are you training, and are you recovering well, and are you fueling properly? If you do those things, find the one that you like. Sometimes it's a psychological thing. I know for
Yeah.
me, psychologically, it's like I can work myself up to a brutal heavy set of 8. I don't want to do 3 sets of 15 or whatever. But someone else might be like, no, man, that brutal heavy set of 8, just like that eats my lunch, and psychologically it's tough, but I can get a better stimulus out of it.
Oh
Whatever.
man. Yeah, and there's some exercises, dude, I'm not doing like 20 reps of or more. Like heavy squats.
Mm-mm.
There was the guys who are like, oh, dude, if you just do one set of 20, like what you could do 10 reps, do it 20. I don't know if you've seen guys like this. Some of
Oh,
it's
I
probably I would do things like that. And you're right though, you can grow from that type of thing. And I think my point was like I did the 4 to 6. I learned some things from it. Did Arnold learn some things from it? I did Mike Mincer, and then I don't know if you know Ellington Darden. He wrote a book on
yeah,
high intensity interval training. He kind of goes through the history with Arthur Jones and Casey Vader, who like gained like so much mass in just
yeah,
doing negatives only.
like 30 days or something
Yeah, it
stupid.
was something like that. Now we don't know like the PEDs, if what was the relationship there? Probably PEDs in that relationship, um,
Yes.
but yeah, I remember though just being like, this is the way to train. Then at Arnold, this is the way to train. Then it was high intensity. No, this is the way to train. And then after like about a decade of training, I realized like, oh hey, I actually learned something from each one of these like training modalities and styles, and they're kind of like tools in my toolbox. And then when I see a younger generation coming up with that have a little bit of science behind what they're saying, like there's some truth to it, but then they're just like, this is the only way. I just kind of chuckle. I'm like,
Well,
I'm going to
I
give you
mean,
about 10 years and you'll probably like changing your tune.
human behavior, you always think the thing that's working for you, it's got to work for somebody else.
Yeah.
And so naturally, I'm a very passionate person. If I find something that I love that's working for me, I want other people to try that too. But I've learned over the years, and I feel like this is something that you can really only learn just by having done all the things. It takes time. It's like you're going to have a hard time learning this at 21. You just need to have done this for a very long time. But yeah, they all have their merit. They all have their time. They have their place. Try them. Don't be dogmatic. Find out what works for you. Find out what works for your clients.
Yeah. Yeah. Now we're coming up on our time here, but I do have a couple more questions I want to get
Go for it.
to. The do you have a hard stop, by the way?
I'm good.
Okay, okay. I'll won't take too much longer here, but I did have a couple more questions. So this is case specific question. Okay, I'm actually asking this from myself, just asking
All right.
what your thoughts are on it. So if you had a client who mid 40s, and you got blood work done, and T levels are not considered clinically low. And depending on where you're looking at it, like clinically low is like under 260 something.
264 or like
Yeah.
300 really is under 300 is pretty rough.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm tracking with you because I consider under 300. Some of these clinicians will be like really precise on it's like 264 or whatever. So he's like right in like the 280s. So it's low. And he's having difficulty. He's in a caloric deficit, having difficulty really losing weight, gaining muscle. He's hitting his training. You know how online coaching is. Sometimes you're just like, are they really tracking everything? Are they really tracking everything? But this guy is really detail oriented, and I believe that he's tracking things. He's really stagnated in weight. I think he would probably benefit with either going on some type of regimen of whether it's TRT or like some type of TRT peptide combination that could help him. I'm like, and I talk to all my clients about this. Like, I'm not an expert in those particular fields. I'm really trying to educate myself in that space. Obviously, you're dealing with that, I think, a lot with even helping clients. Maybe you can answer this question too. Is like, do you have somewhere that you outsource for that consistently? I want to have that question answered if you do have something like that.
I do have a place that I send people. So I'm partnered with Summit Rejuvenation. They're in Missouri and Florida, and they're getting ready to open another one. That's where I send all of my clients for blood work, and they can do TRT.
Oh, okay. Okay. Maybe we could talk off, another time about that. I'd like to ask you a question about that. But so if you had a guy like that and he's like, I really just want to do this natural. I don't want to like do TRT, have that type of intervention. Where would you go from there to kind of help boost those particular numbers? Because as you know, and I know, most of the whole like, oh, take this supplement, it's going to boost your T level. If anything, it's acute and it's going to fall back down. It's not going to give you actually ongoing. Most of the big movers is like nutrition, training, sleep, stress management, so forth.
Sure.
So like he is a pastor, so stress management could be big, but at the same time, I'm looking at this and thinking like, you can lose weight. I think you use this analogy. I've actually used it from you. I think you said, man, if I put you in a prison camp and you were eating less than 1,000 calories a day, is that you? Is that you? Did you say that? Okay.
I was speaking to women there. I'm like, the idea that hormones do not make you gain fat, what they do is they influence your behaviors. And so I do want to get those optimized for health and so that your body is working with you, not against you.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, they don't have creative powers. Like just because your cortisol is up, it's not magically making extra substrate that you're storing. And if you're in a true calorie deficit, it's not storing. Period. Full stop. You're eating too much. Now, metabolic downregulation is a thing. And also, if cortisol is really high and you're really stressed, you're probably moving way less than you think you are. So you're not expending as many calories. So there's a lot of things we have to dig into.
Yeah.
And I say that, and it's funny because the women who have personal agency, they get excited. That gives them hope. And then the people that don't have personal responsibility and they really want to blame a hormone for all their problems just get angry with me. Well, you don't understand. You're just a man. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
thermodynamics applies to you. And if I put you in a prison camp in 6 months, you're coming out skinny. You're not going to, do any of the Holocaust survivors, are they obese because they weren't being fed? Like, let's think.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a good, like, it just kind of levels the playing field a little bit, kind of cuts through the noise. I love the analogy. So with this guy, like, what would you be looking for to try to help move the needle? Or would you be like, dude, I think this is what you need is something like an intervention?
I have a couple questions first. Like one, what is his body weight? How long has he been dieting? What's his diet like? I mean, because sometimes too, fat loss is not always linear, and he could potentially need to, especially if stress is high and everything else. Maybe he needs to go on a diet break for a little bit. Maybe just
Yeah.
bring him back up to maintenance for a hot minute,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. That's good. Yeah.
3 weeks, and then start pushing him back down again. Like, the body needs forced adaptation, and sometimes you need to incorporate refeeds um, in there. So sometimes I'll just put people on a diet break. I do everything I can naturally to try to increase those levels. How old is he?
He's 48.
48. Okay. So he's 48, well past I mean, nowadays, the average 21-year-old has the testosterone of a 75-year-old man in 2000, right? So the mean testosterone level in America right now is 400. And in 2000, it was 600.
Oh,
And
that's
so
interesting. I didn't realize that. Wow.
it's horrendous. And so we have a low testosterone problem in this country. And my decade plus of coaching, I always try to move the needle naturally as far as I can first. But what I've seen is that all the health interventions you can do, making sure that he's got plenty of zinc, magnesium, fish oil, all of that kind of stuff, you should do that for 1,000 other reasons anyways, because it's really healthy. But I've only watched it move the needle so much.
Yeah.
Still not optimal. And I think a lot of it, in his case, stress is certainly a thing as a pastor. In fact, the two professions with the lowest testosterone are firefighters and pastors.
That's
And for the
interesting.
same
I
reason.
work with a ton of pastors, and I've just seen this over and over again. And I'm like, this is
Well, they
what
have
kind of
to,
led me into a little bit more of like, I need to educate myself on some of these interventions, but also like the pastor I'm working with, we do have him on some a micronutrient protocol, like so, like zinc, magnesium, fish oil, to make sure that that is like dialed in.
vitamin D. Yeah.
Say that again.
Vitamin D.
Yeah, vitamin D. Um, I don't know what you think of ashwagandha supplementation. To me, I feel like it's overhyped, but it might. There's some studies that prove that it might actually help with.
Here's the thing with these natural supplements, and you have to like really read these studies carefully. You might get a study, and let's just throw out a big number. Um, Ashwagandha is proven, and I'm just spitballing here. This is not true, but let's just say you see a study. Ashwagandha is proven to increase testosterone levels by 37%. Cool. What's 37% of 280? And is that the level we want him at? Not even close. Is
Yeah,
that going to make a marginal difference? No, not
yeah, and
even
is
a
it
little.
long term or just acute as well?
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct. So I'm like, I'm not after that. I mean, frankly, at 280, I would like 100% and some increase. And you're not going to find a supplement that does that outside of TRT. Now, but you also have to be careful. How overweight is he? Because the more adipose tissue you have, the more that's going to aromatize into estrogen. And so with a lot of these guys, I'm like, hey, if you're a morbidly obese dude with low T, the best thing you can possibly do is lose the fat, because fat is estrogenic. And the more body fat you have on your body, you start taking injectable testosterone, the more that's going to aromatize. And are you even, how much then do you have to take to move the needle? And then how much aromatizes? And it's like, dude, focus on the basics first and strip that fat off. You don't need to be an Adonis or stage lean, but like, man, get that guy below 18% body fat before we start really considering TRT. And so whatever you have to do, if he needs a diet break, if he needs to change up, I don't know how much cardio he's doing, what his weightlifting looks like, but the stress is so critical. Those firefighters and those pastors, they have the same job. Essentially, what do firefighters do all day? Nothing. They do zero things. They screw around at the firehouse until it's a, 4-alarm blaze and the cortisol is sky high for 8 hours and they're rescuing a toddler, or they roll up to a horrendous collision, and they're looking at somebody who's just been decapitated, and they're working
mm,
crazy swing shifts. They're eating crap food, living off of stimulants, not dealing with the stress of the trauma that they see. And so you get poor sleep, poorly managed stress, crap food. Of course, you're going to get crashed testosterone levels. What does a pastor do? Well, he is largely sedentary in his study, but he's also, when he's there on Sunday morning, he knows all the financial issues of the church, of the people there, the failing marriages, the wayward kids, the parishioners that are complaining about what they're not getting from him, the late night hospital calls. And so if he does take a lunch meeting, he's taking it out. He might get moderate protein, but whatever, his wife might cook a great home cooked meal. Maybe if he's lucky, he gets 35 to 40 grams of protein. So he's under proteined, probably a little malnourished from a micronutrient standpoint, poorly managed stress, poor sleep. Of course, it's a recipe for
Yeah.
dysfunction in that regard. Because what do you need for optimal testosterone? Enough training stimulus, not enough, great recovery, or not too much rather, great recovery and great managed stress. And it's like, okay, cool. I'm at a place where if I've worked for 6 months for somebody and moved the needle as hard as I possibly can, and I've gotten them below like 18% body fat and their testosterone is not rising, do yourself, your wife, your family, your church, everybody around you, the world at large a favor and get on TRT. It will change your life.
Yeah. And I
Like
think people think that they have to stay on it for life, and they don't realize that it could actually you can bring it up to a normal level and slowly wean off of
you
TRT.
could, but I also would say why? To what end? Like if you find
Yeah.
out a protocol that works for you, it's not terribly expensive.
I think it has to do with kind of the
Or not work.
fear mongering around like
Yes.
putting a substance in your body. Like people like freak out. They're just like, oh my goodness.
They'll drink alcohol. They'll put Twinkies in their body. They'll. To me, I
Exactly.
just
Yeah.
those things get so wiped away when you're thinking rationally and clearly. In my opinion, we're not taking super physiological doses. You don't even need to take 200 milligrams. Like 150 milligrams is going to take most guys
Yeah.
to a great place. And so, the FDA, 3 months ago, quietly removed the black box warning. There's no risk for cardiovascular disease. You're not going to get testicular cancer. And of course, they're not going to announce that they were wrong for the last 20 to 30 years.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there's no risk whatsoever. If you're in childbearing years, take HCG. You won't become infertile. You're going to be fine. So in my opinion, I'm at a place where I'll do all the things to move it naturally. And then I'm a big advocate of it once you've laid the groundwork
Yeah.
and you have the foundational habits in place.
Now you're on TRT. Yeah. I
Oh,
think you
yeah.
said 250 milligrams
Right now,
a week. Is that what you're doing?
Mhm. That's super physiological, by the way. That's not TRT. I'm on a little bit more. I'm on like 250. I probably sit right now around 1300.
So you're
High end.
trying to give yourself a little edge for
Yep,
training.
I've given myself a little edge right now because I'm training pretty hard.
Are you doing that through that partnership that you have? You're talking about?
Yeah. And so, yeah, so I am, just to be very clear, I'm super physiologic. If I were to come down and stay at like 150, I'm actually getting my blood work done in 2 weeks, so I'll know for sure. But typically when I'm around 150, I'm like 900, which is super high,
Yeah.
like right on the edge of, it's great. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. I think it makes sense too, especially with the sport that you're in and everything. The thing that
Sure.
kills me is when the guys are on it and then they just don't say anything. Like it's just like
Guys,
just be
no,
honest.
come on.
Like I'm glad guys like Alex Ramosi, I know you mentioned him before. Like he'll just like, oh yeah, I'm on TRT. Did you get on it for like the performance end, or is it a combination of low T and you wanted that edge? Or was it?
Yeah, so I think a lot of guys get on way too early. I got mine checked when I was like 28, and it was horrendously low, and I was pushing strongman really high. And so I said, I'm going to wait till I'm 30. And I had some numbers in my head I wanted to hit. I said I wanted a 400-pound bench, I wanted a 600-pound squat, and a 600-pound deadlift, and literally and I wanted a 300-pound overhead press. And the last number to fall was a 300-pound overhead press on my 30th birthday, and I
Wow.
literally started taking TRT the next day.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So you know what? I moved on. I didn't let you answer this question, but with that guy that I was talking about, so you talked about a diet break. So let me just tell you a little bit more what I'm doing and see. I want to see if you have any type of, if you would add anything to this ecology of practices as it relates to his health. So when he came on, I actually put him on. I didn't tell him that he was going on like a diet break per se, because he had been dieting for a long period of time, but we just raised his calories basically to like a maintenance level calories. And he's like, oh, this is like higher. And I was like, just trust the process. This is going to be really good for you. You've been dieting a lot. But we did that for really a couple of weeks, where I think he probably could have benefited from something more like 6 to 8 weeks of like a break for him, because he had been just this diet, and so he has seen like my training with people and helping them not only lose the weight, but learn how to like do an effective reverse diet, maintain that weight loss, so forth. So he's seen that. And that's one of the things that he's training with me for. But I'm wondering if at the beginning of that process is like, he could have been served with actually going a little bit longer
Sure.
in coming up out of that diet. I'm just curious of what your thoughts would be on that, because he has, again, I'm trusting his logging, but he has been clearly in a deficit. We have adjusted his macros a little bit to say, okay, let's cut this just a little bit. Let's cut a little bit of an edge off to make sure that we are in a deficit. Because when you do those, when you're testing someone's, um, the word is leaving me right now. Um, what is the word I'm looking for? Um, BMR. There we go.
Yeah, sure.
There we go. I could not think of the letters. I was thinking, what am I thinking? But when you test that and you get their exercise activity and everything like that, it's not precise. It's based off like kind of like consistent data. So
Right.
somebody's like BMR actually might be lower than average, and so like you might be like, okay, we're not quite as much of in a deficit as we thought we were. So you make some adjustments after a couple weeks. So we made those adjustments, and it's just still been very, very slight. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, push it. I mean, again, I don't know what his weight are, what his body fat is, how many steps a day he's taking, how much cardio you have in place. So it's hard to know exactly, but some variable needs to change. Either the calories need to come down and or, increase his movement or increase the intensity of his movement. I don't tend to like to do hit cardio in deficits.
I'm
Um,
with you. Totally. Yeah.
my favorite kind of cardio would be something like an incline treadmill walk. Just get him in zone 2 and, layer that. I don't know if he's doing any of that, but you could push that up a little bit. It's not going to be super taxing on his central nervous system in any meaningful way, but it's a way to burn some extra calories. Of course, you have to mind how much time he's got in the gym. And so, I mean, there's a whole host of stuff I'd have to look at, but obviously like, yeah, you gotta change something. One of those variables. And then honestly, in his case, he's not trying to be Mr. Olympia or elite athlete. Give him some autonomy. Say, here's the deal. We've got to change something. We need to expend more somewhere. I can do that by taking a little bit of food, or I can do that by layering in a little bit of cardio. What would you prefer at this stage? Sometimes I like giving people autonomy depending where they're at, um, depending on their life and their schedule. Because what you don't want is to layer more stress. It might reduce, it might make sense in your head. You might say, I want to add cardio. And he might automatically get stressed out because he's got a lot of meetings and he feels like gym time's taking too much anyways. And he'd rather eat a little less.
Yeah.
Right. So take those things into consideration. And then,
Yeah.
so that it's tough because there's still so many variables I'm unsure of,
Yeah.
what were those thyroid markers at last time, so yeah, I'd want to
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
a
If you
little
have
more.
time
Yeah,
sometime, maybe I can hit you on the side
yeah, for
a little bit
sure.
with some of those details. No, this was helpful. I always I like to ask different coaches this, because sometimes it's like, oh, that's a really good point, because you can really be
Yeah,
focusing on certain aspects of someone's training. And this is actually a part that I love, because I love being able to say, okay, here's a problem. Let's overcome. And that's why one thing I love about coaching is somebody, they come to you with that problem. And
sure.
for them, because some of them have been trying to solve this problem for years, they actually are doubting themselves if they actually can overcome. So you guide them through the process, and it's pretty simple, really, but they start to see the results. And my favorite thing about coaching is not just the physical transformation, but the mindset transformation that
Yes.
bleeds into all the areas of their life. It's just like they have
Every
become like a very, and I don't mean this in an egotistical way, but they become very confident in
Mhm.
who they are. And it's like, man, this is
Tell
absolutely
you what, when I competed in bodybuilding, anytime, and bodybuilders will tell you this, when you step off that stage, you feel like Superman because it's the hardest thing you've ever done. And so then all of a sudden it's like, whatever life throws at you, whatever problems arise, that was harder. I can handle this. I can handle and do really hard things for a really long time.
Yeah, 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 exactly, exactly. What would be like a belief about training or nutrition that's drastically changed since you started coaching? So you've been in this
My
11
personal
years.
belief,
Yeah, just like, and I know that you're kind of like, one part you
oh
hit
man,
on was actually like not being so dogmatic and saying, hey, there's a lot of ways to get at getting in shape. But what would be something that's drastically changed for you?
oh boy. Um, Well, I mean, I kind of hinted at this in some of my social media posts. Like, if you don't look back at some of the early training plans that you wrote and kind of cringe a little bit, like, ugh. Um, I used to train people how I wanted to be trained, and now I've learned to identify how they need to be trained and how they ought to be trained. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know that I have. I would say that I fell into the trap for a solid year and a half of raging on seed oils. And I've just found, again, I'm not going to go out. In our house, we hardly eat any. I'm
Yeah.
also not scared of them. I just also don't think it's the thing to index on for 99% of people. Um, so I went pretty hard on that for a hot minute, and I realized like it's not really the main mover, and it's not going to help a ton of people. Um, so I would say that's a big one. I've always been pretty open minded in terms of training philosophies and methods. Like I'm going to take what works and use it, and kind of discard the rest. I'm trying to think, man. I don't know that I've had any huge paradigm shifts. I would say that the more experienced I get in coaching, the less complex my plans are. Uh, I train jujitsu, and I was talking to my coach one time, and he said, there's no black belt moves. There's just the basics executed at a black belt level. And
Ooh, that's
I thought
really
that was
good.
immensely freeing as well. They're just doing the basics. Michael Jordan shot thousands and thousands and thousands of free throws. And he didn't do anything novel, right? So I kind of chuckle too when I see all these guys doing all these novel exercises, the optimal bros focusing on the very specific angle and this and that. And I just go, look at the results. What have you produced? Right. Because when I look at the highest level bodybuilders and athletes, they're just training super hard. And, the optimal bros would have laughed at Arnold and Dorian Yates and all of those guys. And
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I
so,
get kicked up of like, dude, like the whole videos. There might be some nuance that could be helpful,
sure,
but people are like, dude, don't have your wrist like this, have it like this, and it'll really hit your tricep better. And it's just like, okay, I mean, you might be able to bias something with some
sure,
variation changes for sure, but like they're just treating like this is the key. Your triceps are really small, and if you just rotate your wrist like this, they're gonna blow up. It's like no, it's like really hard work. Go make sure you're eating well, go sleep well, repeat,
yeah, the
you know?
basics work. So
Exactly.
that's the
I
big thing from
love this no black belt moves, just it's however you said, it's like a black
basic moves executed at a black belt level.
executed at a black belt level. That's just such a really awesome
My
concept.
plans, if you would look at my plans that I wrote 5 years ago, there was so much complexity in it because I was trying and I was trying really hard. And again, if you execute it really well and give a lot of effort, you'll get good results. But I was trying to be super nuanced with every little detail, including things like wrist angles and this, that, and getting super very specific on tempos, 3, 2, 3, and like all of this. And now when you look at my plans, they look pretty vanilla on paper, but I've gotten, and again, I'm not going to position myself as an expert, but I do have a lot of experience now. And so I would say like I execute the basics. I just know how to execute them better in the right
Yeah.
order, in the right frequency, manage people's volumes, volume and intensity and effort and things like that. So my plans as I've gotten more experienced have actually chilled out a lot.
Yes. I would tell people this too. It's just like, I can go into the gym and do 3 exercises and be completely wasted by the way that I
Sure.
trained. Like if I
Yeah.
trained really hard, and some people just think they need to have like 10 exercise per muscle group or something like that. And I've seen
I don't
some
ever
guys that
program
have
more
come, they
than
have like
7 moves in a
15
day.
15 exercises, and it's just the rest periods in between are just like really small. So it's just like the, you feel worn out, you might have gotten a sweat, but it's probably again kind of hitting on what you said. Hey, you're moving, you're probably going to see some change. It's probably some good there. But man, it's just like so complex, so many movements. Oh, have you? What's this guy's name? Seedman, Dr. Seedman. Have you ever seen him? Do you know what
I
I'm talking
cringe.
about? I'm not
I
trying to
just
throw a rock at the enemy here, but like he does this
no,
like
I just
standing on a
scroll past
busto ball, like doing curls
quarter,
with like
doing
a
quarter. Yeah.
neck belt on, trying to train his neck. I'm
No, I
like,
won't. I won't even bother. That's the other tack and approach I've taken on social media is I made a post the other day that kicked off. And it was a little bit of a calling. I didn't call out anybody specific, but I called out coaches that just take these girls and drug them up, give them ridiculous diets, put them on 2 hours of cardio. I'm like, it's not hard to make a girl look good if you do that, but to what end? You're going to wreck her health. And so I usually don't do like call out culture or post negativity and tell people what they're doing wrong. I just try to put out a bunch of positive information out there. So like when I see his stuff, man, I could make a field day of doing reaction videos, but I'm like, not worth my time. Like that guy,
Yeah.
I just go right past him, you know.
I've gone back and forth on that. Like I do think there's this helpful spot where you're like, I want to help people avoid bad trends.
Sure,
But I think you could do that in a positive way. You know, you could still do that in a way that
absolutely.
you're not just like, hey, who am I throwing a rock at this week? There's some guys that build their whole profile and sure, they explode. Like they get a lot of recognition because every
Yep.
video is just like, that's stupid. That's a dumb way to train. You should train like this or whatever.
Did you
It's
see
like,
the girl I posted last week? She's like calling out Sebum for being wrong about how he approaches nutrition. I'm like, you understand you're talking to 6-time Mr. Olympia, right?
oh, is that
You,
that scientific girl that you're talking about?
yeah, she says a lot of true stuff, and even what she was sharing wasn't necessarily wrong per se. But I'm like, you missed the entire context of where he was at. That's the problem I have with social media. Okay, distilled down, a lot of what you hear on social media goes back to a lot of it's true, but people don't understand the context. Maybe they don't understand who the intended audience is. I could give dietary advice that's wonderful for a powerlifter and absolutely stupid for a bodybuilder,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
don't understand the context. You just hear it. Or what if my favorite illustration of this, when we're dealing with gut health issues, let's say I've got somebody with SIBO and they're on a protocol of antimicrobials to clear out this overgrowth of bacteria. Well, during that very specific limited window of time, you need to remove things like vitamin D, magnesium, and zinc because those things feed the biofilms that we're trying to disrupt. Now, imagine you just open up TikTok or open up Instagram Reels, and you didn't hear the first part of what I said because you're texting. All you hear is, and I'm positioned as a nutrition expert, and you hear zinc, magnesium, and vitamin D disrupt or feed biofilms in the gut, and you need to take them out. And then you close Instagram or TikTok, and you're like, oh man, I need to get rid of magnesium, vitamin D, and zinc. That's what's happening on the internet all the time is you're getting sound bites and people don't know how to discern what applies to them and what doesn't. And it's devoid of context because the reels that hit the best are under 90 seconds. And how can you actually say anything truly meaningful in 90 seconds, which is one of the reasons I'm starting a podcast, is because I want to have meaningful conversations like this. And the podcast is first going to be focused on talking to other successful coaches and entrepreneurs, and it's aimed at other coaches and helping them grow and scale their businesses.
Yeah. I love
And
it.
everything from leadership and business and processes and all of that. But eventually, I'll do little mini 8 to 12 minute podcasts on a very specific topic that allows me to go past Instagram's 3 to 5 minute window and give a little more nuance to a topic, right? Because I don't think the 3 minute time cap is enough to always truly capture everything that needs to be said in a way that's helpful and meaningful.
Yes. I love what you're saying. This is actually why I try to do long form content and short form, like trying to do both. But even people will take the long form, unfortunately, and take into a short soundbite, and people will do what they want to do. It's just insane. I just want to have this posture, and probably, well, really this posture of saying, um, I want to be approachable. I want to be able to like if people are around me, oh man, if I do one little thing wrong, he's going to pick it apart and put it on social. I want to be like, I want to be approachable. I want to like encourage people towards being successful. Like, hey, you're not going to get it always perfect, but I want to help. I want to create that, if you want to say brand identity, as opposed to always just like, yeah, sure, I think I could grow much faster initially by just being negative because people like
Right.
negative news, negative everything. It's
Sure.
like, but you know what? Building something that has like a good lasting legacy that's actually building people
Yeah.
is going to look much different.
Well, that's what a brand is. Like people confuse a brand for a logo, a word mark, a color palette. A brand, your online brand, your personal brand is just simply your online reputation. That's all it is. What are you known for?
Yes.
And so when you're building a personal brand, you have to think through What are you known for? And I've reduced mine down over the years. I used to post inflammatory stuff and political things and whatever else. I really don't much anymore, because I've identified what I want my personal brand to be. It's around family, it's around fitness, it's around faith, and it's around business. I'm passionate about those four things. And so anything that you see on my social medias now is largely going to fall into, any main post is going to fall into one of those four buckets, or I don't post it. Or if I do post it, I post it in a story. I'll post funny things, or I might post a political take every now and again if I think something ought to be said or whatever. But then it disappears in 24 hours and it's not part of my digital real estate, if you will. And that's what our social media is. It's digital real estate. And when people land on your social media, you've got about 3 seconds to hook them, or they're going to scroll past. And what do you want those people to get out of that? And does that communicate your personal brand? And so, and that's the things that I think through as I'm posting content.
Yes. Yes. Well, man, I tell you, I maybe sometime in the future, if you're up to it, I'd love to have you come back on, and
Sure.
maybe we could do like a leadership type focused podcast, because that's something that I am passionate about. And you do a lot about just like leading yourself well, like self leadership. But obviously, you're dealing with like helping lead in business, but leading your family well. I think that would
Sure.
be kind of a fun conversation. But I
I'm here for
probably
it.
should land the plane at this point, and we could anything else would open up another can of worms. So, but
Absolutely.
hey,
I'm a
appreciate you coming
talker, so
on.
you got to be careful. You got to be careful about the cans you open.
Oh my goodness, man! And we probably both. You talked about liking to do motivational and teaching, speaking
Yeah.
out, and you want to do that more. I'm the same way. I have the gift of gab, and I can go on and on. So I'm going to try
Love
to
it.
cut it off here. But man, thank you for coming on. This has been awesome.
Absolutely.
This has
Yeah.
been
It's a pleasure
great.
being
I
on.
know it's going to be beneficial to our audience, especially those who are just continue to try to dial in their training. So appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, man. Anytime.